Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, FPL Vincenzo, and today is part 2 of whether we should start with Mo Salah in game week 1. So part 1 is already available, is the proactive approach, looking at starting with Salah, maybe moving him on to Bukayo Saka in game week 2, using the money saved from that to make a striker transfer in game week 3, maybe to get Isak in. So transfers in all the first 3 game weeks. This pod is a different strategy, and when the fixtures came out, this was the second sort of pathway that I was looking down, and it's basically a repeat of what I did last year. So in game week 1 last year, I started without Erling Haaland. Was in a bit of a minority, or certainly felt like it at the time, that I was in a bit of a minority. Thought 15 million was too much. Didn't think, even though Haaland had great fixtures in game week 2 and 3, I still felt like the points he would get over the first 3 game weeks I could cover with other people. And I thought there was alternate captains that could match his captaincy hauls. So we obviously haven't got the prices yet for this season, but my feeling is Salah's likely to be the most expensive player in the game. So he's basically this year's version of Erling Haaland. So using similar logic to last year, then if Haaland was too expensive, is Salah going to be too expensive? And therefore, can we spread the money around? Can we spend it differently? Would that be better for our teams? So that's what we're going to look at today. An approach really on whether we can have or go without Mo Salah, should we say, in game week 1. So on the screen right now is my game week 1 team from last year. So you'll see 81 points in game week 1. And I've got a game week rank 268k. Really incredible start. Really happy with that. And it was spearheaded really by the alternative fixtures we had in game week 1 last year. So you'll see Man City for Haaland didn't have the easiest game. They did win 2-0 away to Chelsea. But looking, if we were doing a fixture assessment going into game week 1 last year, certainly Man City wouldn't have been sort of one of our favoured teams, should we say. So game week 2 and game week 3 were obviously very good, and Haaland went on to score big points in those 2 weeks. But game week 1, not so good. So by not having him, what could I have? And there were 5 really big standout fixtures. The 3 newly promoted teams to the league all had what we would call sort of Champions League challenging opponents. So we had Southampton were away to Newcastle. We kind of felt like Newcastle would challenge for the Champions League, and they obviously ended up qualifying for it. So really nice home game to start for Newcastle. We'd want their assets. Ipswich had come up, and they were, albeit they were at home, but again at home to Liverpool. It was Arne Slot's first game. Wasn't quite sure how that would go, but Liverpool assets obviously very good. We'd ideally like multiple of them. Leicester also at home, but against Tottenham. Obviously, we weren't to know in game week 1 last year the difficulties Tottenham was have, the struggles they would have. I think we all would have thought sort of top 6 was possible. For Tottenham. So again, nice to have multiple of their assets. Arsenal, the other team, or the team I thought would win the title going into last season, had a really nice home game against Wolves. And if you look at the teams who weren't one of the 3 promoted, I think a lot of people would have argued that Wolves were maybe the 4th weakest. So really nice start for Arsenal there. And then there was also Man United against Fulham. And we would have thought there, I think we've been quite happy to own multiple Man United players. So looking at those 5 games in isolation, it's more than possible to own probably 11 starters from those teams, should you have so wanted to. And a lot of the players from those teams are quite expensive. So if you look at my game week 1 team, what I had, Henderson in goal wasn't obviously from those teams, but I think I considered him to be the best of the 4.5 keepers. Trent, I could afford in defence in that game against Ipswich, most expensive defender in the game. Pedro Porro, high upside defender away to Leicester, also not incredibly cheap, certainly not a budget defender. I think I tried to play Barco as well last year, 4 million defender. Brighton had done well in pre-season. Fancied them to do well against Everton, which they did when winning 3-0. Unfortunately, he didn't play, so Conceded was auto-subbed in. Now, the midfield was obviously where I gained the most by having no Haaland, because I was basically allowed 4 premium players. I went in with Jota and Salah for Liverpool double up against Ipswich, Saka against Wolves, and Bruno Fernandes against Fulham. So 4 really nice midfielders, all with great games, all high upside players. Haaland owners probably would have afforded 3 of those, maximum realistically 2 of those. They would have been filling up their midfield with much cheaper players. So that was one game. Then up front, I had obviously Dom Solanke, who I think most people thought was the sort of striker Tottenham needed and would go well against Leicester. Alexander Isak for that plum home game with Southampton. And then I put João Pedro in, as he was considered sort of the better of the budget strikers. On the bench was then Barco, who obviously didn't play, and 2 Fulham players who in game week 1 didn't have it so easy away to Man United. But then after that, their fixtures turned. They could be, just as a brief aside, that could be Bournemouth this year, for example. Game week 1, not all that attractive. Obviously, play Liverpool away. But the fixtures after that for Bournemouth are actually reasonably good. So if you're looking for sort of bench players for game week 1 this year, that might be Bournemouth, might be this year's version of what Fulham were last year. We might get Truffart, the new left back for Kirkes, might be a 4.5 million defender, could be this year's Robinson. And then someone like a Semenyo or a Clivert could be this year's Smith Rowe or something. So something to weigh up there. But yeah, the point of this was really, by not having Haaland, I was then allowed Trent and Porro in defence. I could then have 4 premium midfielders and still afford Solanke and Isak up front. So I would argue I had 8 players who were far from budget players in my game week 1 team. So obviously Haaland, the next cheapest striker down, was about a 5-6 million gap. So for those that had him, they've got to find 5-6 million from somewhere. It's probably sacrificing 2 or 3 premium players for cheaper alternatives. My viewpoint was that my sort of 3 other premiums plus whoever else I had was going to score more points than Haaland, plus 3 budget options, and it worked out for me in game week 1. So I thought there was logic to it, and now we jump on to this year, and are we presented with a similar set of circumstances? Probably not, is the honest answer here. So some key points that I've made on the slide is that Haaland was 15 million last year, but wasn't really the best captain in game week 1. He was away to Chelsea, so taking him on had less risk than maybe what taking on Salah will have this year, because Salah's at home to Bournemouth. I think he will be the most popular captain. So I think going into last year, Salah was a very popular captain against Ipswich. Isak was also a very popular captain against Southampton. I owned both of them, so I had the coverage. Haaland obviously would have still hurt me if he'd done well, because I think he was 60-70% owned or whatever it was in game week 1. But this year, the most expensive player in Salah won't be 60-70% owned. He's going to be 140-150% owned. So the risk, I actually think, is worse this year for taking on Salah. One, for that reason, because of the expected ownership, and the fact that not only is he the highest owned player, the most expensive player, he's going to be the most captain. So bigger risk. Then you look at what the fixtures are. So I say last year we had Newcastle against Southampton, we had Tottenham against Leicester, we had Liverpool against Ipswich, and we had Arsenal against Wolves. Those 4 fixtures in particular stood out in game week 1. If you look at the targeting of the promoted teams this year, we've got Leeds. They're at home to Everton. Not historically and traditionally in FPL or Everton players, big assets with big upside. So no big appeal going for Everton players taking on Leeds. You've got Tottenham at home to Burnley. Some possibilities there. Tottenham with a new manager. But some upside with players like Porro and Solanke again, who I started game week 1 with last year. Links with various midfielders in the transfer market. Someone like Matthias Tell could do well. Even Wilson Odobert could do very well. So I think Brennan Johnson, one of the midfielders who likes to run in behind, as I've spoken about in a recent pod. So I think owning 1 or 2 Tottenham players is viable. Against Burnley, just got to be a bit careful with them. That game week 2, they're away to Man City. So how many of them do you want with that fixture in mind? But certainly in game week 1, I think it's viable to probably have 2. And then the third promoted team, who are we looking at? I've lost my bearings. Who's the other team? Oh, Sunderland. And they're at home to West Ham. So Jared Bowen would obviously stand out. Kudus, if he's still there, would be an option. Maybe Wan-Bissaka could be sort of picked as a rotating defender and then picked for game week 1. I ended up playing Conceded in game week 1 last year. Someone like Wan-Bissaka could fit that role if he's priced at 4.5. But again, realistically, you're not going to want 2. So last year, I think it was quite easy to pick 3 Liverpool against Ipswich. It's probably quite easy to have 1 or 2 Newcastle at Southampton, also 1 or 2 Tottenham. And then you had Arsenal as well playing Wolves. There's not really any big standout here. Man City away to Wolves, not quite as good. Aston Villa have got Newcastle. Liverpool have got Bournemouth. I'd say that could be a fixture to target. You could have 3 Liverpool players comfortably, but I don't think it's as strong as paper as Arsenal against Wolves. So those 4 fixtures last year, it could have been quite easy to have 8 or 9. You're not going to pick 8 or 9 players here from Liverpool, Tottenham, West Ham, and Everton, I don't think. So the fixtures don't quite have the same appeal as last year. And also then, is it the same opportunity of spreading the funds? I said that sort of last year I went in with Salah, Jota, Bruno and Saka as my midfield. That's a lot of money spent on 4 midfielders. That was fine because I didn't have Haaland. If you look at the similar players here who are going to be around sort of the 9-10 million mark, fair enough. I say Salah's pick. If you don't pick Salah, you could go for another midfielder, Wirtz, Gakpo, someone like that. If he's priced as a midfielder, is an option, as an alternative. You've got Jared Bowen away to Sunderland. You've got Cole Palmer potentially at home to Crystal Palace. You could even pick Saka away to Man United, right? The suggestion would be that Arsenal could still dominate that game while Man United are still sort of working on the new system from Emery, etc., etc. But the fixtures don't still quite spreading the funds and picking 4 premium midfielders and things. I don't think has the same ring to it as what I got last year from the midfield I had then. So all of these 3 thoughts make me feel like this approach maybe isn't the right way to do it, and maybe doesn't stand out in the same way as last year, where taking on Haaland seemed a lot more viable. Then another slide here looking at last season's top teams. So if you're looking at picking one of my rules, when I used to do the pods with Man On last year, we did a pod before the season started about rules and strategies that we like to follow. And one of my rules, and I plan to stick by it again where possible, is to try and avoid too many players from mid-table or sort of bottom half teams. I like to, especially at the start, I like to own players from the better teams. So looking at the top 6 from last year, Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, Newcastle, Chelsea and Aston Villa, I've done my own colour coding here for the first 3 game weeks. But I've got pretty much all of them only having what I would call 1 green fixture. Liverpool have got Bournemouth game week 1 at home, Arsenal at home to Leeds in game week 2, Man City at home to Tottenham. I think it's just about a green fixture in game week 2. Newcastle away to Leeds in game week 3. Chelsea arguably have two home games. Crystal Palace and Fulham could both be green in game weeks 1 and 3. Then Aston Villa at home to Palace could be considered a green fixture in game week 3, albeit Palace seem to beat Villa most times they play against them. So there's not, if you look at the best teams and who you want to own here, none of them really stand out that you desperately want loads of their players. You could go in with 3 Chelsea to start. The opening 3 fixtures are reasonable. Their performances at the Club World Cup so far this pre-season haven't been incredible. They're obviously still a work in process. There's still issues I have with their structure and the way they play. And generally, their players are a bit unreliable. Cole Palmer's still on a long streak without returns. Liam Delap's new. Is he going to fit in straight away? I don't know if I'd really want 3 of their players. They're generally an option. Someone like Pedro Neto could be good out wide, could be a cheap sort of way into their attack. Spoken about Cucurella already in a defender blog that he could be useful. But if I'm looking at these fixtures, there's no team here I'm desperate to own 3 from. There's a couple I would probably quite happily own 2 from. Certainly most of these I'd be happy to have 1 from. But none that I'm desperate to own 3 from. None of them have strong enough fixtures for the first 3 weeks. I think I must start with 3 of them. So again, these are the teams that are going to have players of a certain cost. Most of their players, they're going to be the teams that have players worth like 8 million or whatever it's going to be. I'm not feeling like I desperately want to load up on these sort of players. So why am I going against Salah for that reason? You could argue if you are of the mindset and the playing style where you want to avoid the early transfer because you want to roll through the first couple of weeks to build up a nice kitty, then you may want to start with at least 1 from all of these teams, maybe 2 from some of these teams, because their strong fixtures are in alternate weeks. So say you've got Liverpool, maybe a good captaincy in game week 1, Arsenal or Man City in game week 2, and then Newcastle or Chelsea maybe in game week 3. So you might need to spread the money for that reason. And that would be the only reason I think if you was really adamant here that you, obviously if you get an injury or a red card or something, you may have to make a transfer. But if you wanted to set up really to try and roll through the first block of games before up to your first wild card maybe, then you might want coverage from all of these teams. To have coverage from these teams, you need good budget. Salah may eat into that too much. So there's that argument. And then key point 3, I think, is quite noteworthy here. That are we going to flip this from last year? So last year it was avoid Haaland for me and pick Salah. Now, obviously, it depends on the prices here, but if let's just say the prices flip and it's Salah who's now 15 million and Haaland's price has been dropped maybe to 13 or something like that, then could I flip it? And this year it's avoid Salah and pick Haaland. I think it could, because across the 3, Man City do have better games. 2 of them are away, where Liverpool only have 1 away, but it is Wolves, Tottenham, and Brighton for Man City. They're all you could quite easily see Man City getting 9 points from those 3 fixtures. I'd be quite amazed, to be fair, if Liverpool started with 9 points. I think they'll slip up somewhere in these first 3 weeks, whether they won't win at St James's Park or Arsenal come and get something at Anfield. I don't know, but I think you'll get quite long odds on Liverpool winning their first 3 league fixtures. Not so much on Man City. So yeah, I've not written off. Obviously, we'll see what Haaland's price is and what teams we can make when the game launches. But I've not discounted the possibility that this year it might be don't pick Salah at the start and pick Haaland instead. So that's in the back of my mind in the avoid Salah strategy. Nothing too in depth here, but it was more, I say, just to highlight really that the strategy that worked last year, I don't think is as strong this time. Doesn't mean to say you can't play it again. But one of I think the key criteria and the important factors of FPL is sort of treating each season independently. What worked last year might not work this year. I think it can be a fault of some content creators that they've played it for a long time. The way they play similar ways over numerous seasons, and it might regularly ensure they finish in the top 50k, top 20k. So they've got their formula that works for them. I don't like to play it like that, and my results can be more hit and miss in terms of how well I do. But I don't tend to play with the same style every year. I'm trying to progress, trying to develop, trying different things. And say last year that was to avoid the most expensive player in the game because I thought it was worth it. Doesn't mean to say I should repeat it this year because it worked last year. You got to view each season differently. So some takeaways here from what I've spoken about so far is that I think, say, knowing the prices will help here, but looking purely from a fixture angle, there's no obvious team to target with a Salah money saving strategy. So Chelsea probably have the strongest. Man City's aren't bad. Both of those teams have quite a lot of squad depth. Both of those teams are going to be playing at the Club World Cup. Will they get enough break? All of these sorts of things. So we haven't got the standout fixtures like Newcastle, Arsenal, Tottenham, and Liverpool had last year to go against Haaland with. So that puts me off. I say having no Salah does potentially help with better coverage for game week 2 and game week 3 captaincies if you want to avoid the early transfers. I think that's a fair point. So again, understand what type of FPL manager you are, how you like to play the game. If you want to save transfers and roll transfers, no Salah might be a solution for you. And I say the main sort of third takeaway is what I discussed sort of just at the end there was around being open-minded enough that this year it might actually be the opposite of last. It might be no Salah and picking Haaland instead. So yeah, that's all of it for now. No further sort of Salah points until we get the game launches and we can start building a team. But it's just at the moment a bit of a brain dump for me and an opportunity to sort of clear my head and talk through all of my sort of routes for Salah. At the moment, if I'm being realistic, I think I favour the previous pod where I'd start with him in game week 1 to get that captaincy coverage and then look to move him on and be proactive with my transfers and book that in game week 2. But say going with the mindset that I'm booking it in and moving him on to Saka. But we'll see what happens when the game launches. We could be in a very different position in sort of 6-7 weeks time and viewing it all differently. If you're liking these sort of case study type pods, please subscribe to the channel. Like the video, leave me a comment. I'm happy to reply and start some conversations in that way. Also message me on Twitter if you'd like as well, FPL Vincenzo on there. And we'll have some more case studies coming up. I've got some thoughts on a few more topics, something on Southampton and Sunderland comparisons, some thoughts on sort of a Rico Lewis type strategy, and certainly some thoughts on wildcard weeks, because as well as sort of prioritising your premium players, I think knowing when you're going to wildcard is quite helpful to maximise in the early game weeks. So look forward to those in the next few weeks. And until then, I'll speak to you all soon. See you later.